All right, what's up? So just gonna do a quick demo here for a Droid patch I've been working on for a couple of months, which I'm calling SuperGrids, which the name will make sense later, I think. But anyway, if you don't know what Droid is, this is probably not the video you should watch first. I would recommend some other videos and reading the manual and checking out what the Droid ecosystem is all about. But this video, I think, or this whole project, I think, is trying to take Droid as far as it can go and see if you can really make like a full module, a full sequencer, drums, melodies, 8 tracks. Yeah, so to get started, I guess the underlying structure is 8 tracks, which have both gate pattern and CV pattern, and both of those are using the algoquencer circuit. If you've ever programmed with Droid, then you know what I'm talking about. But the algoquencer circuit, which has a lot of algorithmic possibilities, and I was trying to make an interface that you can use to interact and change the parameters of those 8 algoquencers. So, yep, there's 4 main sections of the interface that I ended up with so far. You have the pots, which will change parameters, and what those parameters are depends on what of the 6 different modes that you're in. Then you have the mode section. You have 6 modes: gate mode, alt mode, CV mode, performance mode, groove mode, and project mode, which is like settings and stuff. And then you obviously have a play button and a reset button. And the next section is the selectors. So this is where you select which track you want to edit. And when you select that, then all the pots and the buttons will apply to that track that you have selected. And the cool thing is you aren't limited to just editing one track at a time. I made it so that you can select, if you click and hold and then click another button, then you can select any combination of the 8 tracks you want to edit simultaneously, which is actually a pretty big deal because it lets you do some really cool things at the same time. Like, say the beat is playing and I want to increase how many beats just those 3 channels are playing. I can increase them all simultaneously, or I can limit them simultaneously. And you can see the outputs here or here. Another cool shortcut is you can double tap any of these 8 buttons and it will select all of them, which is really a much faster way than having to manually select all 8 of them. Another cool shortcut, which takes a little practice but is really helpful, is that if you double tap and then quickly press one of the other buttons, then when you release, it flips them. So it's basically letting you say, okay, I'm going to select all with my double click, but then deselecting, boom. And then, so if I wanted to say, I want to select everything except the kick drum, I would double tap, click the kick drum, let go, everything is selected except for the kick drum. So that lets you select stuff really fast when you practice a little bit. And yeah, so then the last section is mainly used for the step buttons, like where you can manually input what patterns you want. Like here, at the beginning of that video, I input like a 4 on the floor kick drum, snare, hit, hi-hats. It's just a normal step sequencer that you see everywhere else. And yeah, but that's useful. So you have manual access to all 8 channels and the steps that they do. But in other modes, these buttons are used for something different. So let's get into that. But the first thing we should talk about is the gate mode. This is probably the most mode you'll use unless you like the performance mode. But for the most part, you'll probably be using the gate mode. You select what channels you want to edit, and then you have the 8 knobs up top with different parameters. I've color-coded my stickers so that it's easy to remember where everything was put. But yeah, you can see the mode color represents the color of sticker on the pots. So in this case, for gate mode, you have activity, variance or variation. You have offbeats, you have rolls, deja vu, alternate bars, groove, jitter, which I'll explain later, and gate length. So most of these are standard algorithmic parameters, but they've been tuned to work the way that I think is most musical. But for starters, activity and variation and offsets. These are in offbeats. These 3 are the most useful for crafting what the beat you're going to hear is algorithmically. So, for example, if we start, well, let me mute all the other tracks. That's a little preview of what you'll hear later, but I just forgot that the filter was all the way up. Okay, so if we're just looking at the kick drum, I muted these tracks so they're half lit right now. I'll explain that later. But we're just looking at the kick channel, and this is the activity knob. So I manually input a pattern, but I can additionally add beats if I turn this clockwise. And also for now, I'm going to disable the groove jitter so that it's just a straight clock. 100% just goes crazy. Anything less than that will automatically add beats to whatever you have here. As you start going counterclockwise, it starts taking them away until there's nothing left, and then it's silenced. So that's cool. Variation, also very useful. It takes the number of beats that you manually input or are being generated, and it moves them around somewhere else. And it's not going to show the changes on the step buttons. It's just going to continue to show you what you manually put in here. So as I change it, it gives you up to 8 different variations. But let's just stick with the kick 4 on the floor for now. So let's say I want to now look at the snare pattern here. I can add more. I can change what that generated pattern looked like. Now the offbeats The offbeats is super cool because it lets you decide if more of the beats should be generated automatically on offbeats or on onbeats. So let's hear what that sounds like. So that's the offbeats, and this is onbeats. You can hear they're more in line with the kick drum. Whereas with the offbeats, they're more playing in the opposite beats as the kick drum. And in the middle, it just doesn't prefer one way or the other. Cool. Next is the rolls. So I think we could think about the hi-hat for this one. I'm unmuting as I go. As you increase rolls, more and more of the beats start to ratchet. I set them to just double. You can edit that in the patch itself, but I found that it's already pretty quick and I didn't really want to go any faster than that with my rolls. When you have it all the way, everything rolls. If you're wondering why the clock is doing weird sounds, that's because I have the groove jitter on there as well, but I just turned it off. Straight clock. Cool. So if you want the beat to start randomly evolving certain number of your beats, then you want the deja vu knob. Deja vu takes it from 100% repeating the 16 beats every bar to fully randomly changing your pattern. So the hi-hat pattern is not set at all. It's not even following, or yeah, now it's not following anything. And in the middle, it'll take some of the beats and put them somewhere else, but some of them will remain where they're supposed to be. And deja vu only affects beats that were automatically generated with these parameters. It's not going to affect, so if I didn't have any variation on and I had all the activity off and I was just playing, I had no rolls and I was just playing the beats that I manually put in, deja vu is not going to do anything. It's only affecting the algorithmically generated beats. Alt bars, I will get back to that in a second, but that has to do with the alt mode. Groove jitter, I think you've already kind of heard what that sounds like, but I have, in the groove mode, you can set different 8-step timing changes. So like if I wanted it to sound like it's swinging, for example, you can set every other beat to be delayed. When you turn the knobs clockwise, it delays them, and this plays it before the beat. So if you remember, I disabled the groove jitter for this channel, but now if I re-enable it, it starts bringing that swing in until at 100% is in the middle, and at 100% it's fully taken the groove pattern with it. If you go past 100%, it will start introducing randomness, like humanization, also on top of the groove pattern. So if I go all the way, it's going to be a bit sloppy, which can be really fun. At 100%, it'll do exactly what the groove pattern sounds like, and at 0, it'll be a straight clock. So that lets you dial in the amount of that groove pattern for all 8 channels separately. So like if you don't want your kick wobbling out of time, you can set that to 0 and all the other channels can follow this groove pattern. And then also you can make a humanization on any other channels that you want, and that can sound really nice too. And lastly, there's gate length. Makes the gate really short, makes it really long. And as with every parameter, if you select, multiple channels at once and you change the gate length, changes it for all of them, which I find gate length in particular is very useful for that. You can make everything suddenly really short or really long, somewhere in the middle. Great. So that's gate mode. A lot of information there, but let's go right to alt mode. So alt mode, very much the same as gate mode. The only difference is these step buttons now are set to be toggles. So if I wanted to toggle the kick drum to be different every certain number of bars, that's what it'll do. It'll mostly do the same pattern until it gets to the alternate page, and then it toggles whatever step was there before. So in this case, it's set to be every 4 bars. So right now it's going to switch. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that lets you extend the length of your sequence, so it doesn't have to be 16 notes or 16 beats. And how you change how long until it does this alternate page is the alt bars knob. This invisible or this virtual notch, that's set to 4. So every 4th bar, and that's the default value. When you do it here, every single bar is going to do the alternate page. And remember, these are toggling what was set on the main page. And then when you go all the way to the right, it does every 8 bars. And in the middle, every 4. I usually just leave it at 4. That's alt mode. CV mode is the blue stickers, and CV mode is used to generate 8 different CV patterns, and they can be used voltage per octave pitch. They can be used for anything you want. But right now, I actually have channel 8 being sent out to this synthesizer here, and I'll get into the MIDI stuff at the end, but right now it's set to set channel 8 out to this little Roland synth. So let's unmute channel 8. Just as a little bass line. So I unmuted it, and in CV mode, I can affect what that pitch sequence is. So right now I'm using the CV as voltage per octave pitch, but of course you could use the CV for affecting parameters of your FX units or of your filters and whatever you want, or the level. It can be really cool as level if you're playing samples or something, so to give it more of a groove as well, and humanize in that dimension. But right now it is pitch, and so the gate and the pitch work together to create this bass line. So in CV mode, you also have activity knob and a variation knob, just like in gate mode, and a deja vu knob, except they only affect the CV, not the gate pattern. So you can actually edit them different so that the CV changes but the gates don't change, or vice versa, the CV pattern stays the same but the gates are changing around it. So yep, CV activity works exactly the same as in gate mode. Fully on, then the CV will be changing every single beat. Otherwise, it will be changing no beats. And I'm editing channel 1. I should probably edit channel 8 so you can hear that. So the activity is constant, so now the output of the pitch is the same. You can hear the bass is playing the same note over and over. Cool. So if you don't like the actual notes that it's playing, the pitch of the notes, you can also use this variation, CV variation, and you have 8 different pitch patterns that you can jam between. I like that one actually, that's cool. But you can always go back to the original one just by going fully counterclockwise. But I like this one better. That's CV variation, CV activity. Deja vu, also same thing as in gate mode. It'll let the CV path pattern start randomly changing, and if you want it to always be random, you go fully clockwise. Back, we'll loop the original pattern that you had set. Cool. And these two are super important. This is the CV bass. So this decides where the lowest note is going to be that is allowed to play. You can go from -5 volts to 5 volts, so pretty large spread. And then you have CV range, which says, okay, from that CV bass note, how far can I go above there? And you can go up to 5 octaves above your lowest note. So if it's at 0, you're just always going to play whatever the CV bass note is set to. And then you can start going up more and more octaves until you get to 5 octave spread. Cool. Next you have CV resolution. This kind of takes a second to understand, but this is deciding how many notes it's going to allow in between the lowest note and the highest note that your CV is allowed to reach, or the highest and lowest voltages. This is just dividing that range into sections and saying, okay, we can do this many in between. So I think at most I set it to be 30, and then at minimum it would just be 1. So it'll just pick, I think it just picks the middle between the lowest and highest notes. And then if you go here, it can only do 2. That's actually kind of cool. And then eventually it goes back to all the way to 30. I'll just leave it there. It's definitely more useful when you have CV quantization bypassed, which I just bypassed it, so that it's not picking voltage per octave pitches quantized. It instead is just a free CV. So if you're using this knob for pitch, you would want to bypass quantization, which is what this knob is for. And lastly, you also have slew. I don't think slew is going to work very well because it's going over MIDI notes, and I didn't set it to handle slew. So slew is going to do nothing if you're going out there, but you can actually see it here. I turned up slew, and you can see that it's not discretely changing on every step, it's sliding. And if I go all the way down, now it's discretely changing on every step. Hopefully that is visible in the camera, I'm not sure, but I think we know what slew does. And that's it for CV mode. So cool. Now the bottom three are, I guess, higher level thinking. You're not thinking about making the pattern. I guess groove mode you kind of are. Let's talk about groove mode. So groove mode, as I already showed before, it does let you create this groove pattern, 8-step groove pattern, which is affecting the master tempo clock. And but what I didn't tell you is that you can also use the selectors, and then these buttons down here become the length set. So you'll set the length of each channel in terms of number of steps. So like if I were to select the bass, the kick drum, I can change it to be 1 step long, and it's just gonna go kick, 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 kick. 2 steps long, 3 steps long. And that's really fun. 5 steps, all the way back up to 8. And I've noticed that when you do return to the full, it goes back to where it would have been had you not changed it at all. So it remains in sync with everything, which is kind of cool. It lets you just jam, change things, and then you can always go back to where you were before, and it's still in sync with the other tracks. But yeah, as you've seen before, you can select all 8 channels, change the length for all of them at once. I just re-enabled quantization, so it's more musical melody. Great. So 2 modes left. We've got definitely going to save the project settings for last because this is the most boring. Performance mode, I think, is one of the most fun parts of the sequencer. But yeah, let's dive into how that works. So as you'll see, the step buttons down below are now actually like a keyboard, like, you know, a piano keyboard. You've got the white notes and the black notes, starting at C, ending an octave higher. And this is actually used to musically quantize all of the channels simultaneously. So if you have enabled quantization for that channel. So if you're using any of the channels for pitch, they're all run through a miniphonion circuit so that they get musically quantized to whatever scale or whatever notes you're holding at that time. So let's hear what that sounds like. So if I were to hold just a C, only C notes are allowed to play now. It's not going to change the octave, but it's going to limit any note to be a C of some octave. Or I can pick a G. Or I can pick a chord. play chords. Like I'm on a keyboard. So that's pretty fun. I hope someday to add like a CV recorder so that you can record chord progressions like this. But for now, the CV recorder takes up too much memory and I cannot do it. If you don't want to use your fingers the whole time, you can use this button, which is a latch button. So toggle latch on, and they stay on. Even if you switch modes, you come back, they're still on, and they're still latched. Very cool. So the next part of performance mode is the selector buttons are now no longer selecting things, they are muting things. This is where your mutes are. So this is, performance mode is supposed to be like a high level where you get one thing you can edit with gates, one thing you can edit with just bringing the channels in and out, and one where you can edit all of the CV channels simultaneously. And so yeah, this is mutes. And what's great about the mutes is if you do mute something, as you've been seeing this whole video, they are visible half lit in all of the modes so that you don't forget that you muted those. But to unmute them and to mute them, you have to be in performance mode. So yeah. And the double press shortcuts, I didn't implement that here, but maybe I will in the future. And then lastly, the knobs in performance mode is maybe one of the most fun parts of this, and truly the SuperGrids like reason for that title. Because you have, as you see by this green sticker here, you have the activity parameter for every track 1 through 8 at your disposal at the same time, which lets you bring in drums, bring out drums when you're jamming along with someone. So let's try it. Cool. So yeah, that's super fun to play with. I think that's the most improvisational section. Great. So I think that just leaves the settings. We've come to the end. And this is where you'll set MIDI stuff and the main project tempo. Yeah, I barely even used these CV outs in this demo, but it's really fun when you start using all 8 CV outputs on different parameters for different things. Like they don't even have to correlate to that particular track. You can use several on the same track. But anyway, things get crazy. For now, project settings. So main tempo, really fast, very slow. Oh, right. When you get all the way to the very bottom, then it starts syncing with incoming MIDI. I don't have anything I'm syncing with right now, but if you wanted to like hook the USB into your computer, you can sync with your DAW. It'll follow the MIDI clock. And right above that is the slowest at some point. Yeah, I guess that's the slowest of the main tempo that you can go. And I think I set this to be 120 BPM at the notch. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the truth. So in addition to the main tempo, you do also still have these selector buttons. And what's great about that is that you have a clock divider per channel. So if you wanted your hi-hats to be going twice as fast, this is the clock divider and multiplier. In this direction, it's a clock divider. So I just divided it, I think, by 8 or something. It's pretty slow now. At here, it's like just a 1. It's not affecting either direction. And then if you keep going, it's going to start going real fast, real quick. Clock multiply. So that's cool because you can do it per track. Also, you might want to reset if you've been messing with that, with the reset button to get everything back in sync. Let's get the bass back in here. Yeah, so as you can see, you can make it really quick. Or slower. I think slower is more useful for melodic lines. Because now it feels like it's longer than 16 beats. Okay, so those are the two clock related things. Now you have, oh no, there's one more clock thing. This is a clock offset. This is in case there's some delay with the MIDI that you're sending to some other synthesizer and things are not aligned correctly. There's a clock offset, which I think goes up to 1 second or somewhere around there. But if you have it here, there's no offset at all. And it just takes the entire master clock and just shifts it by a certain amount of time so that you can line it up with something else. Next, we have MIDI channel in. Since there's no MIDI in, I can't really demonstrate it, but yeah, so you can choose from 0 to 16 or 1 to 16 for MIDI channel in, MIDI channel output. Right now it's working. If I were to change this to channel 8 or something, you get no more MIDI out. Now this, and these two knobs do nothing yet. I'm just gonna see what's important to people and we can add some more preferences, but I don't have anything that I wanted. So the last knob in the preferences project mode is your output, your MIDI output selection. Because MIDI output circuits take up a decent amount of memory, I could only fit one in this patch. And when that is frustrating because that means you cannot send out track 1 through 8 on channels, MIDI channel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You only can choose one MIDI channel. And because of that, I've made this selector knob so that you can switch between sending all 8 channels out as gates, like they all fire on their unique MIDI notes, which is useful for if you're using this as a drum sequencer to sequence a MIDI, like a drum plugin or drums on your iPad, or a separate non-eurorack drum sampler. You would go all the way to fully. It was just above it, but if you go to fully counterclockwise, then you can hear the bass is now playing really low notes, and actually you could see the drum patterns. I don't know if it shows up in the video, but yeah, so it's playing the drum patterns. If you keep going up, now it's only channel 8. If you keep rotating, it's going to start including channel 7 and then 6 and 5 all together. So you're going to continue to have channel 8 and channel 7 both sending MIDI notes to the sequencer, or to whatever you're sending the MIDI notes to. If it's like a polyphonic synthesizer, you could send channels 4 through 8, and now you're sending polyphonic MIDI notes to your synthesizer, which can be cool if you want to use this completely as like a melody generator. And all the way, you start, as you can hear, you start getting all 8 channels. But let's just go back to just 8, just channel 8. All right, and the last thing is presets. So presets, yeah, there's some good news and some bad news with presets. The good news is you can have presets, but the bad news is the preset is limited to only what you've manually input into the gates and the random seed used to generate the CV curve, but none of the parameters that you set with these knobs are going to get saved in the preset. I've requested that there's some way to do that in the future, so hopefully that becomes possible in the future, and then you'll be able to save everything that you do to create a beat. You'll be able to save it as a preset, but I can't promise that will be ever possible, but hopefully it will. But yeah, you have 16 presets, so you can program manual gate patterns into any of the 16 presets and switch between them. To save, I think I implemented this a while ago and I forgot, but I'm pretty sure that you just click and hold and it'll save to whatever you clicked and hold. You can click around, it's not going to change. Also, this might change in the future because I'm still deciding what's most useful here, but currently if you click around, nothing happens. If you long press, it saves whatever you have to that preset, and to load one, you hold the project mode button and then click your next preset. But yeah, that's it. Let me know what you think and give it a shot. Make some beats, make some music. And you can check out the GitHub for the project for everything I said and probably more in written form. And yeah, feel free to request things or give feedback on how it could be better. All right.